Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded event for GCE Government and Politics, getting ready to teach Units 3 and 4. To help you get the most out of this session, you may want to have the following documents handy, as we will refer to them during the session. A. Specification. B. Getting started. C. Exam Paper 3A, June 2015. D. Mark Scheme 3A, June 2015. E. Principal Examiner's Report 3A, June 2015. The last three items are to give us an illustration of the various documents that are available for every paper and exam series, and to highlight some of the useful information that they contain. The format of these documents is common across the different papers in Units 3 and 4, and after this session, you may wish to access these documents for the papers you teach for several past series. You will find these on the Edexcel website. Here are the aims and objectives of this training session. You will review the structure and content of the qualification. Look at example assessment materials. Address common issues and frequently asked questions. Let us first look at the structure of the qualification. A2 Government and Politics makes up 50% of the whole A-level. As you will be aware, the AS level, which comprises Unit 1 and Unit 2, common to all candidates, makes up the other 50%. The A2 itself is divided into Unit 3 and Unit 4, each worth 50% of the A2, and therefore 25% of the total A-level. Within each unit, there are 4 available routes, A, B, C, and D. The 2 Route A papers relate to the same theme of contemporary politics. Route B papers to political ideologies, Route C to the politics of the USA, and Route D to global politics. Most centres choose the same route for each paper. Thus, 3A and 4A, or 3B and 4B, and so on. However, it is permissible to choose different routes, provided that candidates study 1 Unit 3 paper and 1 Unit 4 paper. Thus, 3A and 4C would be an acceptable combination, but 3A and 3C would not be. Looking in more detail at Unit 3, which is Key Themes in Political Analysis, you can see here the paper available for each route. Route A, Contemporary Politics, looks at UK political issues. Route B, Political Ideologies, at an introduction to ideologies. Route C, The Politics of the USA, at representative processes. And Route D, Global Politics, at the structures of global politics. And you can see here that Unit 4, which is Extended Themes in Political Analysis, follows the same pattern. Route A, Contemporary Politics, looks at EU political issues. Route B, Political Ideologies, at other ideological traditions. Route C, The Politics of the USA, at Governing the USA. And Route D, Global Politics, at Global Political Issues. Each of the papers identified above is itself split into 4 topics. These are described in more detail in the specification, including key concepts and content explanation. And I strongly recommend that you look at the relevant section of that in more detail after this training session. Each paper is further developed on, in terms of the sort of specific content covered, in the Getting Started document, which I also strongly suggest you look at. I must emphasize, though, that the latter document is only guidance, and you should always come back to the specification. On this slide, though, you can see a list of the topics within each of the first two Unit 3 papers. You will see that for Route A, there are 4 broad policy areas, and for Route B, 4 ideologies. You will also see an example of a key concept for each topic. Most topics have 4 or 5 of these, which are key to a secure understanding of the topic. And continuing here with Route C, 4 aspects of the representatives' processes of the USA, and for Route D, 4 aspects of global political structures. Again, you can also see examples of key concepts. Similarly with Unit 4. You will see that for Route A, there are 4 aspects of EU politics, and for Route B, 4 further ideologies. And here for Route C, 4 major areas of US governance, and for Route D, 4 broad global political issues. Just to recap at this stage then, each candidate should study 1 Unit 3 paper and 1 Unit 4 paper. In most cases, they will study 2 papers from the same route, but this is optional. Within each paper, candidates will study 4 topic areas. That takes us neatly on to assessment, and it is important to emphasize here that unlike with the AS Unit 1 and Unit 2, both units on all 4 routes are assessed in exactly the same way. Each paper is 90 minutes long and is worth 90 marks, which is quite useful when guiding candidates as to the rough division of time when answering the papers. Candidates get a choice of 5 short response questions, each worth 15 marks, from which they must choose 3, and a choice of 3 essay questions, each worth 45 marks, from which they must choose 1. You will note that candidates have a total of 8 questions, of which they answer 4, 3 short responses and 1 essay. In general, those 8 questions will be made up of 2 questions from each of the 4 topics on that paper. However, on any given paper, one topic will have 2 short responses, but no essay question, and there is no set pattern from year to year as to which topic this will be. Here are the assessment criteria, which are again common to all routes on both papers. The first 3 criteria will be familiar to you from AS: knowledge and understanding, analysis and evaluation, and communication. The 4th criterion, synopticity, may be new to you. It is part of analysis, but is marked separately, and is assessed through the essay questions only. We will look at each of these 4 criteria in turn, and briefly consider how they apply to each of the 4 routes. For knowledge and understanding, candidates are required to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of relevant institutions, processes, political concepts, theories, and debates. Naturally, the knowledge shown will differ from route to route and paper to paper, but I have listed some examples here. However, I must again emphasize the need to consult the specification for more detail. That is always the definitive document to return to. Just to emphasize 2 points, although they hopefully both go without saying. Firstly, The amount of knowledge and degree of understanding required is equal across the different routes and papers. No route is easier or harder than another, nor is Unit 4 harder than Unit 3. Secondly, the use of illustrative examples is, like at AS level, fundamental to demonstrating knowledge and understanding. For analysis and evaluation, candidates are required to show the ability to analyze and evaluate political information, arguments and explanations, and identify parallels, connections, similarities and differences between aspects of the political system studied. The skills used for analysis are the same for all routes and papers, but will be applied appropriately for each specific route and paper. I have again listed some examples here, and must again emphasize the need to consult the specification for more detail. Again, the level of analysis and evaluation required is equal across the different routes and papers. No route is easier or harder than any other, nor is Unit 4 harder than Unit 3. For communication, candidates are required to show the ability to construct and communicate coherent arguments, making use of a range of appropriate political vocabulary. This refers to the structure and flow of a student's argument, including introductions and conclusions for essays. Short responses also benefit from a brief introduction, but require no conclusion. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar are not separately assessed, although they can naturally contribute to the level of coherence. The communication skills used are again the same for all routes and papers, although there is specific key vocabulary for each. I have again listed some examples here, and must again emphasize both the need to consult the specification for more detail and the equal level of difficulty between routes and papers. That brings us to synopticity, which, at its most simple, is the ability to identify, understand, compare, contrast, and weigh up different viewpoints within the route and paper in question. This links closely with the requirements for balance in essay questions across all papers, but beyond that requires sophistication and subtlety of understanding. Synopticity is the enemy of the homogeneous they, in the sense of conservatives think X, the EU has Y level of power, or presidents do Z. Candidates need to understand that good scores for essay questions, particularly in terms of synopticity, depend on a number of views being directly contrasted. M argues this, but N argues that, rather than contrast indirectly or implicitly. This clearly does link to analysis, but is scored separately on essay questions. I have again listed some examples here, and must again emphasize both the need to consult the specification for more detail and the equal level of difficulty between routes and papers. Those are the different assessment criteria. You can see here the number of marks available for each of those criteria by question. One stark contrast with AS level is that many more marks are available for analysis, evaluation, and synopticity, a total of 50%, than for knowledge. This is not because there is less knowledge in A2 than AS, there is, if anything, more, but because the ability to analyze and evaluate that knowledge, not to simply describe it, becomes much more important at A2. Having distinguished between those criteria, I should now explain that when marking short responses, examiners do not award separate marks for each of the criteria. Instead, they give a global mark out of 15, which takes the 3 criteria into account in their proper balance. Marking is guided by the use of levels, as shown here, by indicative content, and the provision of threshold indicators within mark schemes, which we will look at shortly. The indicative content lays out the sort of points candidates might make, but is neither exhaustive nor restrictive. Candidates can be credited for valid points not listed, and need not cover every point listed to achieve full marks. The threshold indicators essentially lay out what is specifically expected on each question to gain entry to Level 2 or Level 3. By contrast, when marking essays, examiners do break down their marks by all 4 criteria, including synopticity. Levels are again used, and the breakdown by level and assessment criteria is shown here. Indicative content, which is neither exhaustive nor restrictive, and threshold indicators are also both used. Thus, if you recall a candidate's paper, you will notice only 1 mark out of 15 for short responses, but 4 individual marks and then a total out of 45 for essays. A final key point to note in terms of assessment is the format of questions. Questions are designed to assess candidates against the criteria outlined, and there are a number of common formats used to do this. You will again notice the focus on analysis, with questions requiring candidates to explain why. Unlike AS level, there are no questions that require only knowledge. This list is itself not exhaustive, and I recommend that you view the past papers for the routes that interest you after the session, to gain a clearer idea of the full range of questions and styles used. Essays most often follow one of the 2 formats shown here, although there are exceptions. You will see that in both cases they invite balance and synopticity. The premise of the question will often appear one-sided, but the use of "to what extent" or "discuss" demands that the answer is not one-sided. So, just to summarize the resources that are available to help relate the above to the units and routes that interest you. On the website, you can find the past papers and mark schemes for all of the papers ever written under this specification, which for A2 papers were first sat in January 2010. Up to 2013, there were 2 series a year, and since then 1. When the specification was written, which is again the definitive go-to document, a set of example assessment materials was also produced, and these are again online. I should caution you, though, that some of the content, particularly in the mark schemes for the more contemporary routes, will now seem out of date. Routes A and C, in particular, change very quickly. And this specification was first taught before the 2008 US presidential election, and first sat before the 2010 UK general election. The other documents that I strongly recommend looking at in detail are the principal examiner's reports for each paper. These not only give marked examples of responses for each question on each paper, but also a general overview of the paper, advice on what distinguished the stronger candidates from the weaker, and invaluable advice to candidates for future series. In order to help the above points make sense in reality, we are now going to look at the documents from one of the papers, 3A, that was sat in June 2015. Many of you will teach different papers. but the points that I will draw your attention to remain the same. Firstly, please open up the question paper. You will see important instructions on the front cover, including the number of questions to be answered and the total time and marks available, which you will recall is 90 minutes and 90 marks. On page 2, you will see 5 short response questions, of which students must answer 3 for 15 marks each. Those answers should start on pages 3, 6 and 9. On page 12, you will see 3 essay questions, of which students must answer 1 for 45 marks each. That answer should start on page 13. If you look at the 2 sections together, with a total of 8 questions, each of the 4 topics has 2 questions. On this occasion, the economy has 2 short response questions, question 1 and question 4, but no essay. I should again emphasize that it changes from paper to paper as to which topic has no essay, and there is no set pattern. You might also note the use of some of the common question formats discussed above. Question 2 uses explain the arguments for and against, and question 5, using examples, explain why, whilst there is discuss and to what extent amongst the essays. Moving on to the mark scheme. The general marking guidelines on page 3 give several pointers that you may find of use when teaching exam technique. You will see that each question follows a common format with brief context, indicative content, which is of course not prescriptive or exhaustive, and indicators for typical threshold level 2 and level 3 responses. Each question is followed with the common detailed level descriptors. For short responses, these are global, and for essays, they are broken down by assessment criteria. And thirdly, and perhaps most usefully of all, the Principal Examiner's Report. This starts with an overview of the paper, identifying common areas of stronger and weaker candidate performance. For each question, it gives an overall commentary, explains what factors distinguish stronger responses from weaker ones, and then gives 1 to 2 real candidate responses with the mark awarded and tips arising. These can be very useful for making exercises either with students or with colleagues. Towards the end is a very helpful summary of guidance given to candidates arising from this paper, again useful when teaching exam technique. And finally, there is a link to grade boundaries. This slide lists common issues, which you may notice closely correlate to those often discussed in the guidance to candidates at the end of the principal examiner's reports. Much of this is self-explanatory, but can be summed up with reference to 4 pieces of pithy guidance often given to candidates, with slight variations as to the precise wording. Answer the question, the whole question, and nothing but the question. A minute a mark. There's no such thing as a good one-sided essay. If you can't see synopticity in the essay question, look again. In terms of teaching tips, much of good practice for teaching A2 Government and Politics is good practice for teaching in general. For example, in terms of balancing teaching time between topics, accessing all of the available material, and considering the importance of exam technique. 3 particularly relevant points for A2 Politics, though, are firstly, the emphasis on synopticity, at all times encouraging students to be aware of and exploring different viewpoints and theories. Second, the need to link theory to policy, both being of fundamental importance to politics. Ideas glean more credit with examples, just as policies do better with underlying theory. Finally, politics is a much more living, breathing subject than most, and a focus on contemporary developments is very important. What makes a good discussion of party welfare policies in 2010, for example, may well be ancient history by 2016, whilst content related to global terrorism might be seen to change month by month. Route B on political theory changes less often, although even here its application might alter. But Route B also requires the need to understand and deploy the detailed viewpoints of a wide range of specific theorists. In terms of useful resources, I would be remiss not to again emphasize that everything should start with the specification, for which getting started provides useful development. I can't recommend specific textbooks, but there are good books available, particularly on the theoretical and institutional aspects. The more contemporary papers, 3A in particular, are harder to teach from books since they develop so rapidly. Outside of textbooks, there are a range of other useful paper resources, with newspapers, periodicals, and manifestos all being of considerable help. Again, I can't recommend specifics, but would suggest using a range focused appropriately to the routes and papers in question. The Internet, although not without its hazards, can also provide a very useful array of resources, particularly for contemporary content. I would recommend using a mixture of parties, non-party political groups, and commentators, and more neutral academic sources. This applies to all routes, although depending on the route you will want to broaden your focus beyond the UK to a greater or lesser extent. That's it as far as routes 3 and 4 in particular go. This next slide provides hyperlinks to exam result statistics, which may be of use to you in compiling your annual departmental report. The grade boundaries hyperlink also provides more details as to what raw mark is required to reach a certain number of UMS marks. This may enable you to frame your students' performance in greater detail. Regarding specification reform, GCSE English subjects and maths are changing for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. GCEs for a range of subjects are changing for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. Other GCSE and GCE subjects will follow in 2016 and 2017, with Government and Politics, in future to be called just Politics, scheduled for first teaching in September 2017. Thank you for listening to this pre-recorded training presentation. We would welcome any feedback via the online feedback form, since we are keen to improve our support to centres which provide their students with the opportunity to study Pearson qualifications.